During the WNBA this season, I feel like we sort of had one of those particular growing pains where it's like some of the people that are coming in and watching the sport and are fans of the sport feel like maybe they're there for a weird reason. And now they've found sort of maybe one player to hyper fixate on that they feel stands at odds with what a WNBA player is in their minds. And they passionately love that player in a way that actually just feels like it's hate being disguised as love that they want to have against the rest of the league. And we sort of had this moment where the rest of the fans had to go like, you paid the same money for your ticket and you being here is also helpful to the sport. And that's a really difficult thing to do. They had no sort of reverence for the fact that like, buddy, this conversation's been going on without you for years and years and years. And now you come in here and just think that you can, because you love this one player.
Sue Bird has finally shown her hand, and at this point, it's impossible to ignore. In her latest podcast episode, the agenda was crystal clear. Team USA is being framed around Paige Bueckers, while Caitlin Clark is quietly pushed to the margins. The episode title signals it, the visuals reinforce it, and the conversation seals the deal. When the league's biggest draw is consistently erased from the spotlight, that isn't an accident. It's intentional. And now, that strategy is unraveling fast. The real question is this: how long can anyone sideline the player who revived the league before fans fully wake up?
Podcast with Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, and the guest was Katie Nolan, and they were talking about the growing pains in the WNBA, and they decided to put out this clip on their Twitter to promote their new episode with Katie Nolan. So this was a choice for the podcast to use that clip to promote their episode. This is not like someone was clipping it out and it went viral. And I actually went to the main episode to kind of watch that clip in its entirety because I just wanted to make sure that nothing was taken out of context. And to be totally honest with you guys, watching the whole clip made the clip that they put on social media that much worse.
Let's break down what just happened on the Sue Bird podcast, because this situation has officially crossed from questionable into downright absurd. The episode title alone tells the whole story. Team USA 2028, forecasting Paige Bueckers and the young stars along for the ride. Not Caitlin Clark and the future of USA basketball. Not a true passing of the torch. Instead, Paige Bueckers gets top billing, while everyone else is reduced to a vague category. That framing isn't subtle, it's completely transparent. If you're enjoying, please leave a like and subscribe our channel. If you want more, let's know in comments below. Let's get started.
During the WNBA this season, I feel like we sort of had one of those particular growing pains where it's like some of the people that are coming in and watching the sport and are fans of the sport feel like maybe they're there for a weird reason. And now they've found sort of maybe one player to hyper fixate on that they feel stands at odds with what a WNBA player is in their minds. And they passionately love that player in a way that actually just feels like it's hate being disguised as love that they want to have against the rest of the league. And we sort of had this moment where the rest of the fans had to go like, you paid the same money for your ticket and you being here is also helpful to the sport. And that's a really difficult thing to do. They had no sort of reverence for the fact that like, buddy, this conversation's been going on without you for years and years and years. And now you come in here and just think that you can, because you love this one player, and this one player is very good. She's very, very good. And like, I would love to just openly love them. Those are the types of moments that as a women's sports fan, I like really bristle against, where I'm just like, I hate that we have to go through this, but we do have to go through this. This is the growth period.
But it actually gets worse once you watch the episode. A graphic flashes on screen showing a Young Guns versus OGs scrimmage meant to highlight the league's emerging stars. And who's featured? Paige Bueckers, Jackie Young, and Angel Reese. Notice anyone missing? Because it's impossible not to. Caitlin Clark, the player who instantly transformed WNBA attendance, shattered viewership records, and pulled casual fans into women's basketball, somehow didn't make the cut. That isn't a harmless oversight. When the most impactful athlete of the era is erased from the visual narrative, it stops being coincidence and starts looking like deliberate exclusion.
For a large group of people, mostly that exist online, it wasn't enough. Like, love a player, love Caitlyn, love whoever you want to love. But it was simultaneously they had to then say that every player that ever came before.
The overall quality of the episode was honestly disappointing. Throughout the entire podcast, Sue Bird repeatedly gushes over Paige Buchers, framing the so-called young guns entirely around her. Paige is subtly positioned as the unofficial captain of the group, while everyone else feels secondary. Sue talks at length about how adorable it was, how badly they wanted to break ties during scrimmages, and how competitive things became. And to be clear, this is not an attack on Paige Buchers as a player. She's talented, she has potential, and she comes across as a respectable person. That's not the issue. The issue is reality. Paige Buchers recorded the third lowest home attendance figures in the entire league last season. That's not opinion, that's data. Star power cannot be manufactured. You cannot force fans to care simply by repeating a narrative. Audiences vote with their wallets, their screens, and their attention. And right now, they are not showing up in massive numbers for Paige the way they are being told to. What Sue Bird appears to be doing is attempting to will Paige into a level of celebrity that the audience hasn't chosen. It feels like insisting something is iconic just because you say it often enough. But sports doesn't work that way. Fans decide who matters. When Caitlin Clark plays, arenas sell out. When her games air, viewership explodes. Even when she isn't playing, people still tune in just to follow her team because they are invested in her journey. That's real influence. That's genuine star power. Instead of acknowledging what the numbers clearly show, the WNBA establishment seems determined to push a preferred storyline. It's like walking into a restaurant where nearly every table orders tacos, yet the manager insists the cheeseburger is the real favorite. The statistics don't lie. The audience has spoken.
Called sports fandom a complex experience. I loved that so much. Do say more about that. What feels misunderstood or oversimplified or uncovered?
Yeah, I think there's so many aspects of this that we could focus on. One of them is sports hate. Sports hate is so unique, I think. And it's also, I feel healthy in a world that's full of a lot of hate that's very unhealthy and very bad. I think in general, hate, I try to shy away from, but you've got, we're humans, so you have to have all range of emotional experiences. And I think one of the safest places to put your hate is dude, I hate the fucking Yankees. I hate them so much. I hate them so much that while I'm doing my job and I meet a Yankee, I'm like, no, I don't want to know you. I absolutely hate you. It's based in nothing. If anything were to happen to that person, I wouldn't want them to suffer. But you're just it's safe hate is sports hate.
But if they got traded to the Red Sox, you'd be like, I love you. I love them.
I'd go, give me a second. I'd go, I don't know, give me a second. But I also feel in terms of, look, sports fans are men, women, non-binary. Anybody can be a sports fan. I think a lot of sports media caters to a specific male audience. And I also feel that's a male audience that has not been told that their feelings are something that they can experience. And so I think a lot of the time, men don't even realize how much of an emotional experience being a sports fan is. And so that's kind of part of my thing is I just want them to feel hey, the way that sports make you feel, we can talk through that. So it's just such a weird experience that people who don't love sports don't understand, but that I want to kind of pick apart.
Let's take a step back, because this didn't start with that Paige Buchers-centered podcast episode. It's part of a broader pattern that becomes obvious once you connect the dots. Just days before that show aired, Sue Bird gave her guests a platform to criticize Caitlin Clark's fan base without offering even minimal pushback. No clarification, no balance, just silence, which in this context spoke louder than any statement. During that discussion, Clark's fan base was painted as destructive, hostile, and driven by suspicious motivations. Millions of people were casually lumped together and labeled problematic. And what did Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe do in response? They smiled. They nodded along. Not one moment of resistance. Not one, maybe we shouldn't generalize millions of fans. Nothing. That silence speaks volumes. What makes this especially infuriating is the hypocrisy behind it. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe built their public identities on being champions for women's sports. They've spent years talking about growth, visibility, and bringing new audiences into women's basketball. But the moment those new fans actually arrive, suddenly they're unwelcome. Suddenly they're accused of being there for the wrong reasons. Make that make sense. One guest on the podcast went so far as to suggest that people are only watching because they're hyper-fixated on Caitlin Clark, implying that this fixation is somehow suspicious or unhealthy. That statement alone deserves scrutiny. What exactly is a WNBA athlete supposed to represent? Because by any reasonable definition, Caitlin Clark is everything the league claims it wants: elite talent, relentless competitiveness, marketability, professionalism, and must-watch entertainment. Caitlin Clark gets blamed for every perceived negative in the league. Rowdy fans? Her fault. Physical play becoming excessive? Somehow her responsibility. Media attention being unbalanced? Obviously, Caitlin's doing. Yet when you bring up record-breaking attendance, historic television ratings, sold-out arenas, global media attention, and international recognition, suddenly she receives no credit. Then it becomes a collective effort, or organic growth, or something that was already happening anyway. The mental gymnastics required to criticize someone for everything negative while crediting them for nothing positive should qualify as an Olympic event. So, let's talk facts, since emotions clearly dominate this discussion. Before Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, most teams, outside of a handful of strong markets like the Aces and the Liberty, struggled to draw even 3,000 fans per game. That's not exaggeration. That's documented reality. The league was losing tens of millions of dollars annually. Television coverage was minimal. Many casual sports fans couldn't name 5 WNBA players if their lives depended on it. The league existed, yes, but it wasn't culturally relevant in any meaningful way. Then Caitlin Clark arrived. Almost immediately, Google searches related to the WNBA surged nearly tenfold. Not doubled, not tripled. 10 times more people were actively searching for league content compared to the year before. Arenas started selling out. Networks began competing for broadcasting rights. Merchandise disappeared off shelves. Social media engagement exploded. Viewership remains elevated. Attendance remains strong. Engagement metrics continue to rise. Fans are watching games that don't even feature Caitlin Clark because she served as the entry point that brought them into the sport. They may have arrived for her, but many stayed for women's basketball itself. That is literally the ideal scenario for league growth. And yet, the conversation took an even more absurd turn. One guest claimed that fans who are deeply invested in Caitlin Clark are actually expressing hatred disguised as admiration. Think about how ridiculous that is. Millions of people are buying her jersey, traveling to see her play, watching highlights, following her career, and supporting her sponsors, not because they admire her, but because they secretly dislike her? That's not just wrong. It's nonsensical. Nobody watches hours of basketball out of hatred. Nobody buys merchandise for an athlete they despise. Nobody spends time and money traveling to games to support someone they can't stand. That's not how human behavior works. These fans are genuine. Their enthusiasm is real. Their support is measurable. Dismissing all of that as concealed animosity isn't just offensive. It's strategically disastrous for a league trying to expand its audience. One important point did emerge during the discussion, though it was never fully acknowledged. When you have millions of supporters, even a tiny percentage of bad actors becomes highly visible. If just 0.01% of Caitlin Clark's fanbase behaves badly online, that still translates into thousands of loud voices. Compare that to a smaller fan base where 10% might be toxic, but that only results in a few dozen people. Ironically, the guest even admitted to receiving death threats from multiple fan bases, including supporters of Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and others. That's awful, and no one should experience that. But here's the key point. Destructive behavior exists across all fan bases. Yet the podcast discussion fixated almost exclusively on Caitlin Clark's supporters as uniquely problematic. That's bias. That's agenda. And context matters here. Sue Bird isn't just a media personality. She's deeply involved in USA basketball. She helps shape rosters, decisions, and culture. When she platforms voices that frame Caitlin Clark's influence as a problem, while simultaneously erasing her from episode titles, graphics, and conversations, that isn't accidental. That's narrative control. Consider the timing. Caitlin Clark has appeared on Sue Bird's podcast multiple times. She gave her time during All-Star Weekend. She's been professional, respectful, and cooperative with the USA basketball program. And this is the return? Allowing guests to trash her fanbase while constructing marketing campaigns centered on Paige Buckers and pretending Caitlin Clark doesn't exist. That's not just unprofessional. It feels personal. The Young Guns versus OGs scrimmage story could have highlighted multiple emerging stars. Instead, Paige Buchers was named repeatedly, while other young players received vague mentions. Caitlin Clark, who was literally present, was ignored entirely. The message couldn't be clearer. Sue Bird has decided who she wants to position as the future of USA basketball, and she's willing to use every tool at her disposal to make that vision stick, regardless of what fans want or what the data shows. Here's the uncomfortable truth the WNBA establishment doesn't want to confront. Caitlin Clark scares them. She's too influential, too powerful. She doesn't fit neatly into the narrative they've spent years crafting. She attracted fans who don't necessarily align with the league's political or cultural framing. And worst of all, she did it without asking permission. And fans loved it. Sue Bird and her peers deserve credit for building the league. That legacy isn't threatened by Caitlin Clark, it's validated by her. The fact that the WNBA survived long enough for someone like Caitlin Clark to elevate it to new heights is proof that their work mattered. But ego and insecurity are powerful forces. Instead of embracing evolution, certain voices are resisting it. Instead of celebrating growth, they're trying to control it. And while Sue Bird attempts to force Paige Buchers into Caitlin Clark's spotlight, the rest of us are watching the league's biggest star get quietly erased. The irony? It's happening on platforms that only exist because the league expanded. And people are noticing.